In this video, you will learn how to configure a router in a secure way to protect the machine against cyber attacks. The router is one of the key elements to protect the machine. Let's have a look to a typical machine network. On the right side, you have the machine network, which shall have included the router to protect the machine behind. On the other side, you might have the customer network with the OT environment and with a few servers to provide, for example, process data to the machine. Furthermore, there might also be some software to configure and create products which shall be produced by the machine, and the processed data will be stored on a server so that later on the machine can grab the information to build its products. Finally, you might have some internet connection to do a remote maintenance. All these different protocols are running over Ethernet. Well, there are a few steps to do to make your machine secure against hacker attacks from outside. First, consider changing the default password of your device. Second, check if the firmware is the newest one, and if not, please update it. Third, switch of all unused interfaces to your router. The less interface you have, the more secure it is. Fourth, the same rule is valid for the ports. The less ports are open, the less risk you have to be compromised. Fifth, set up the time settings in your router to an NTP server to ensure that your log file is showing the right timestamps for the relevant logs you might look for. Sixth, the router can be used as an NTP relay that every device behind can get the same timestamp for logging or messaging. Seventh, delete the allow all rule in the router to turn it into a whitelisting device that really all the unwanted traffic is blocked. Eighth, then after deleting allow all, you must set up the rules to manage to allowed traffic. For example, if you want to communicate with an SFTP server, you have to write a rule to open port 21. Ninth, consider using encrypted communications like OPCUA with certificates. 10th, for secure maintenance connection, you can use VPN connections like Ulink, the remote maintenance platform from Weidmüller, which makes the handling very easy and secure. 11th, finally, you shall consider that you can use filter with a direction. Also, in case of remote maintenance, it is a sensible protection to forbid traffic backwards from router to the upper network. In case there is a virus on the machine, it cannot jump easily to the computer of the service technician. Let's jump a bit into the web interface of the router doing the settings now. The first step is to change the password of the router. Therefore, we start the web interface of the router. Type in the default credentials, which is admin and detmold. If it is the first start on the web interface, the router will start with a wizard and will ask you to create a new password. Okay, consider this should be a more complex password than detmold. Recommendation is minimum 12 characters with a mix of numbers and capital letters. Once you have a new password, you can close the wizard clicking the X in the upper right corner of the window. You can also change the password in your settings, or just create a new user if necessary. Next is to check the current firmware, and if the firmware is the latest one, everything's fine. If not, please download the file from the Weidmüller webpage and upload it here. Next is to switch all the unused interfaces of. Normally, a web access from the WAN side is not necessary, so switch off the web access from the WAN side. That makes it much more difficult for any attacker to get onto the router. Next step is to switch off unused services, like for example DNS. Sometimes you may have Telnet or SNMP like shown here. To check which ports are open, we can use the tool ZenMap for example. Here we type in the IP address of the router and go for a quick scan just to see whether there are still open ports. We are seeing that here, for example, the port 53, which is the DNS service, is open, and also the 80 and the 443. So minimum the DNS is not used on the WAN side. But if you need no internet connection from your machine, you better switch it off at all and then apply for the settings. And if you then try again to scan, you would see that the DNS port, the 53, is no longer open. ZenMap is showing now that only port 80 and 443 are still open. By the way, you can also close port 80 by selecting that no HTTP connection is possible at the web access settings. Next step is to make the time settings for NTP to get the correct timestamps. Therefore, we jump into date and time settings, and easily you just can select Enable and use the pre-configured server. If you have your own server, you might type in the right IP address then. Once you apply the settings, it will turn to the real time. You also can use the router as a relay for all following devices in your machine network. In this case, you just mark it here in the configuration Enable NTP Relay. And once you set it up, you can go, for example, to a uControl. Just set up the right time server in the uControl, means the IP address of the router itself. Currently, you see the time is in the past in 2022. The server will now be set to the address of the router, as there's no direct internet connection for uControl itself. Now you can see in the time setting has already taken over the new time and everything is working properly. Next step is to delete the Allow All rule, which is turning your device into a whitelisting. Whitelisting means all traffic is blocked until you define rules to allow specific communication. This is the securest way to configure a router firewall. The Allow All rule is just for the convenience for our customer, but not a secure setting. Next is then to define the relevant filters for your system. For example, here we make a filter rule for an MQTT connection, just to show you how it works. I will make a new rule which is called Allow MQTT. And I can select the inbound interface and the outbound interface. With the additional rule, I can exactly adjust the source IP address, which is starting the conversation. If I know the IP address of the destination also exactly, it makes sense to type it in also. Then it's like a point-to-point connection. You can also select the right port. If you know the communication port number, it is most secure to fix the communication to it also. Then give the rule a name. Finally, describe your rule to better find and understand the function of it later again. And then you click on Apply, and the rule is working. This is now the filter rule for relevant services, for example for OPC-UA or something else. Step 9. If you can use encrypted connection like OPC-UA or MQTT with a certificate. If you want to learn more about this, there's another video explaining how to encrypt MQTT connection in our support center. Using remote connection, for example with U-Link, which is a very comfortable and secure remote maintenance platform from Weidmüller, is shown in additional videos on our platform. Finally, you can also configure the filter with the direction, and that makes it much more secure, because then, for example, the request from a device is blocked as long as the direction is wrong. In case there might be a virus on the machine, this keeps the virus isolated on the machine. Now the machine is well protected. That's it. Thank you for watching. See you soon.